Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining. Welcome to Navigating Career Pivots as Women in Tech, which is our latest edition of the In Good Company event series, where we seek to bring you insights, thought leadership, and strategies to help education marketers navigate the constantly changing environment. I'm Maddie Gordon, a Senior Client Solutions Manager at LinkedIn on the education team, and I'm happy to be your host of this webinar today as we close out International Women's Month. As someone who studied fine arts in college and then pivoted to a career in marketing and sales, today's topic is of great interest to me. Over the last 2 years, many people have changed careers and industries under the Great Reshuffle, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. Today, we're excited to have with us Steph Miller, Senior Director of Demand Generation at Udemy, and Monica Dudosky, Manager of Client Solutions at LinkedIn. In their fireside chat, you will learn about Steph's career journey and how she not only became a leader in the tech space, but how she seeks out opportunities to help others advance in their careers. We're also happy to have Mickey Velez from the LinkedIn Insights team, who is going to share some great data and insights around the economic graph as it pertains to gender research, as well as other research she has put together regarding the Great Reshuffle. And just a few housekeeping slides, or a few housekeeping notes. Today, we're going to have an interactive discussion between our speakers, but we want to make sure to hear from you. So please don't hesitate to put your questions and comments in the chat. Also, to kick things off, let us know in the chat what school, company, or agency you represent, and what is one thing you are looking forward to learning today. If you have any tech issues, my colleague Gail Polanski is here as well, so please use the chat to let us know if you need any assistance, and we'll do our best to help get anything sorted out. And lastly, please share your learnings and key takeaways on social with the hashtag #InGoodCompany with LinkedIn. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mickey now, and I'm going to have you kick us off with your story behind the Great Reshuffle and the education landscape today.
Yes, thank you, Maddie. Hi, everyone. My name is Mickey Velez. I am based in New York, and I'm an Insights Manager leading the education and tech verticals here. So before we get into the fireside chat, I thought it would be great to share some insights on what's happening with the Great Reshuffle and also what's happening with education today. So what exactly is a Great Reshuffle? So employees globally are rethinking not only how they work and when they work, but why they work. Professionals are prioritizing flexibility and fulfillment at levels higher than they ever did before. And on the other side of this, employers are also recalibrating their business models, talent needs, and company culture. So I have a fun slide here. I want everyone in the webinar today to put in some numbers here with each question to kind of get a good gauge of what we're thinking is happening in today's workforce. So in working Americans, what percentage do you think are considering a job change in 2022? Give it a few seconds. Okay, I see some numbers here. Yeah, interesting. So 62% is actually the number. So if you're thinking about a career shift right now, you are not alone. There are many Americans right now looking to go in a different route. So similarly to the next question, what percentage do you think are looking for an entirely new role? Give it a few seconds there as well. Okay, interesting. The answer is 33%, so slightly lower, but interesting to think about what's happening just in the overall landscape where we're thinking about totally new role, totally new industry. And now a lot of you probably have dealt with pursuing side projects or passion projects during this time, especially during the pandemic. What are some numbers that you think for this one, for the third question? Let's give it a few minutes there too. Yeah, I see 50%, 20, 30, okay. The number is actually 34%. So really interesting, especially since we're looking at women looking into tech and thinking of other side projects there as well. And then the fourth question, one of my favorites, is learning something new for their existing job. So I think when we look at next place, sometimes you think, what else can I learn? What is the number there? Okay, seeing some 90s, 70s, interesting, good. So the number is actually 30%. So we're going to dive into that a little bit further as we go in the next few slides. So thank you for the participants there. So let's dive into a little bit of why we are in this great reshuffle to begin with. So the top three pillars are priorities, change, and values. So when it came to the pandemic, it really urges people to really rethink their priorities. What is happening? What can we do to rethink our priorities overall? And the change was really what made us change in terms of compensation, benefits, and work-life balance. And then lastly, values. We want to make sure that we were better aligned to the values of the companies, and the companies are also better aligned to the values of the workforce. And so how are professionals doing, and what are they doing to prioritize this? So what's interesting here in this slide is that now work-life balance actually trumps even the bank balance for job seekers. So no longer is it compensation and benefits that trumps it. It's work-life balance. It could either be about mental and well-being. It could be more about just flexible, about hybrid or remote work life. And then after compensation comes to colleagues and culture. So while companies are prioritizing some of these key dimensions, there is a mismatch when it comes to employees and employer priorities. So as we see here in this slide, one of the top priorities for future employees to consider a new company is work-life balance, but we see on the right-hand side that work-life balance is probably on the lower end of the spectrum. So the top three major trends that we're seeing is flexibility and hybrid work, company culture, and job market patterns. And flexibility is here to stay. Employers are actively prioritizing it, and employers who action on this see tangible benefits. Company culture is an ever-increasing priority, and as professionals rethink this relationship with their employers, they really benefit from it. So improving company culture really starts with professional development. And as we saw from the respondents, it really comes down to these next few pillars: professional development opportunities, flexible work support, mental health and well-being, training managers to lead remote and hybrid teams, and diversity and inclusion. And job trends highlight the growth in certain areas that reflect the evolution of our world over the course of the pandemic. And what's interesting that over the past 6 years, we've seen a 25% change in member skills, and this is still projected to grow about 40% by 2025. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this when it comes to the fireside chat. But what's very interesting is that non-degree programs grew significantly quarter to quarter, and it's really diving into the short course, online courses, boot camps, or certificate and online education. And if you remember from the little quiz that I gave you all about percentages, the last bullet point was very specific about next plays and looking either internally or externally. You don't necessarily have to go for a full service 4-year or MBA. You could possibly look for a short course to up level and skill sets your current career. So we'll love to hear in the chat if anybody has taken some non-degree programs. It could be a SQL course, an effective speaking course, or anything like that. We would love to share that amongst them. So I personally have taken courses at NYU and at Fordham, and they've been very spectacular, and even taken some at Udemy. So we'll love to hear it and see that on the comments. And some nuggets for wisdom as how you prepare for the next step in your career. Some skills that here we want to up-level your remote skills. As I mentioned before, remote or hybrid work is here to stay. Think about what you can do to up-level that. Talk to your manager, talk to your teammates, and look at LinkedIn Learning for some courses here to how to upskill this. The skill of tomorrow is learning. Here at LinkedIn, we're always about continued education, always be learning. So think about that as you look into your next step of your career. And then prioritize your assessment of company culture. I feel like in the past, we always wanted to make sure that we were a company fit. And now with the pandemic and this cultural shift, we're looking to make sure that we're a cultural add and that the company culture also is a nice fit for our own needs. And as we move into other leaders, roles as leaders, we want to make sure that also we lead with empathy. And then lastly, but definitely not least, we want to make sure that we are prioritizing our well-being, and that's both physical and mental health. And with that, I have the pleasure of now introducing Steph Miller from Udemy and my great colleague, Monica Dudosky. They're going to talk about their transitions and their great career trajectories in this fireside chat. So off to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mickey. Hi, Steph.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is always a good topic, I think. So
Yes, absolutely. I felt like very seen with some of those numbers and statistics. So I'm very excited for our chat today. So we do have a little bit of a tradition here at LinkedIn, just to kind of help get to know one another a little bit better. But what is something that you would like people to know about you that does not appear on your LinkedIn profile? It can be anything.
I love it. You might be able to figure it out. Like if you sleuthed a little bit, you probably could figure out some patterns. But I definitely think for me, I have like a really deep love of learning. I mean, I think about, I grew up in Michigan. My dad was a teacher at the high school that I went to. Definite pros and cons to that. I used to ski and started instructing. So then it was like sharing knowledge with others became like a really central theme, which I still see, today, doing stuff like this even. And we just recently moved to wine country. So, now I'm like geeking out on wine. There's always too much to learn there, but definitely think that that's been something that has kept me energized and might not show up in like a bullet in a resume, but.
That's awesome. And so it sounds like working at Udemy is perfect for you then.
It's definitely on the right track, right? Yeah.
That's awesome. And congrats, by the way, on your recent promotion to Senior Director of Demand Generation. That's incredible.
Thank you. Thanks.
So today we're here to talk about career pivots, being women in tech. So as you think about your career journey, your career path, like, is there someone who really inspired you, in your life and in your career?
Yeah, I wish it was like a superhero specifically, or like maybe some famous person more people would know. But for me personally, I think, that's just it. Sometimes it's that one person in your life that just tends to really inspire you. And at the time when I first got into the working world, I took a job at a bank. It was called First Community Bank. It's now been bought by US Bank. But my boss was married to a man who ran an ad agency in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And he was like, by all standards, the coolest guy I could ever imagine trying to work for. And I was a newly minted designer just out of, 4 years of school. And I actually showed my portfolio to her. Her name is Linda, and she hired me at the bank. And I thought, oh, I'm like 1 degree away from famous people now. So like, that was really great. But she just, she inspired me mostly by her actions. She led with a lot of purpose, and she was very thoughtful about, encouraging me in particular, I think, to, go ahead and stretch myself, and like, oh, you haven't done that before. Why don't you give it a shot and see how it goes? And then she would listen and give feedback. And she was just a very proactive manager, and I think I saw her as like the ultimate epitome of like a successful, strong in a leadership role, and that was really inspiring, especially early on, to have that type of a leader, that really got me thinking differently about what I could do or what I was capable of doing. So yeah, now it's, for me, it's like, I want to be that person, I want people to think, wow, Steph, yeah, she's definitely doing it.
That's awesome. Well, Linda sounds amazing.
Linda's amazing. Right.
I think the fact that you were able to have, a manager, someone like that to look up to so early in your career is honestly just like so incredible. I think, when we think about our career paths and our journeys, there's always, people along the way, but the fact that you were able to meet her so early on, like, that's incredible.
Yeah. And it's not the case for everyone either, right? Like some people don't get that opportunity. They're not given the exposure or the access to people that could really shape their lives. And I definitely, see that as a really great privileged opportunity to have that so early on, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't I didn't have a Linda, but I did have a Charlene. And she was in my life while I was in law school. And then when I started to work in law school, and she's actually the person who got me to even think about making a pivot, because I would come to her house after work in my, ill-fitting suit, exhausted. And she was like, you always look very tired and unhappy when you come to my house after work. Like, why are you a lawyer? So thank goodness for the Lindas and the Charlenes out there.
Yeah. And you have a great suit now. So
right. That I can wear by choice and not compulsion.
There you
go. So, as Mickey shared with all of those really interesting stats, we're definitely at a really interesting inflection points when it comes to the Great Reshuffle. Even when we just think about like women in tech and we think about the headlines, what stands out to you about being really important at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's like we've all experienced a lot of change over the last couple of years, forced, decided, otherwise taken personally. And I don't know about, I can't speak for everyone, but for myself in particular, I feel like learning was actually a really pivotal and strong, good place to land. Like, I think back to like, oh my gosh, we don't know what to do with all these hours now. We start baking bread. All of a sudden, like learning gave us control over a portion of our lives in a time when we weren't really sure how to get that control back, because everything was sort of up in the air. We didn't know what was going to happen with the pandemic and everything. And I think for me, it sort of solidified like, wow, we have a lot within us to get like to be strong and make change for ourselves, even if it's just by learning a new skill at home. But I do think that translates to giving people more of a sense of empowerment, to take things into their own hands a bit and say, I'm not gonna just leave it up to chance. So, yeah. Yeah,
I love that word, empowerment. And that's what I thought of as you were talking. The fact that we obviously can't control like anything outside of ourselves, but we can control what we learn. We can control how we spend our time. And how we kind of continue to add to our skill sets, whether that's bread or whether that's SQL, you have control over that.
Right.
Okay, so it's going to go back to the beginning a little bit when we think about your career path. So you started off in newspaper and banking industries before moving into tech. So can you tell us just a little bit about how that pivot came about, and like what sparked your interest in changing careers?
Yeah, it feels like it was a really long time ago. I definitely don't think it was intentional to go into like publishing or banking necessarily, right? Like, although looking back, I can see some trends where actually, it's like, oh, you did it once. It's easy to get another foot, in the door with a similar, type of work. But for me, shifting into tech was sort of twofold. I was very interested in the techie things within the design world, because I studied graphic design in college, right, and visual communications. And I wasn't actually a great designer. Like I had a vision for it, but I couldn't do what I wanted to do with it. And so I felt like that was limiting me to some degree. I was not going to become the next person featured on Ad Age or anything like that, So I was like, okay, if it's not quite design, like what is it that I'm liking? And it was like, at the time, this dates me a little, I was like, social media, Foursquare. We could get people to check in on Foursquare at our branches and then give them a $50 certificate if they do it more than 10 times. Like starting to get creative with how to use this new social media thing and like try to build a more community around it. It was a community bank. It kind of made sense. I think I got 5 people to check in. There was a mayor at one branch. But I was super excited about that. And so that started getting me to think differently about tech in general. And I thought, I want to be a part of this. Like that just sparked something in me that made me think like, I need to get into this somehow and be more directly involved in it. And it of course took a number of years to actually get out into California and, start working in Silicon Valley. But that was sort of the spark for me of saying like, there is a whole world of people on the edge of stuff. And I really am drawn to that. Like I find that sort of the unknown space really compelling. And so that's what made me kind of wake up to it a bit. We could unpack that for days, probably.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it sounds like you were really self-aware in the sense of knowing what interested you, and like understanding like kind of like where your natural energy lied when it came to work. So
yeah, I like to think that. I mean, we're all just kind of a hot mess inside, right? But I think, yeah, I definitely am a very like reflective person. Like I probably stew on things a little sometimes even, but for me, there's always just personally, I'm sort of like compelled to like, what's the better version of this, you know? And so that's always ticking, you know, just pushing a little bit.
Yeah. And I mean, when it comes to tech, when it comes to like working in marketing tech, that ability to think that way is so important.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely true.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
So when you were, you know, once you kind of got out to California and started charting your different, you know, career path, like, was there anything in particular that you were looking for, like in your next play?
Yeah, I mean, so I had kind of said, okay, gosh, I need to get graphic designer out of my title, right? Like at some point, I was working in a marketing team, you know, so like I was seeing what other marketers were, people who are actually marketers, or what they were doing. I thought, I like the business piece. I like the like understanding that what we're doing is driving a result for the business and starting to make those connections. And like, that was really interesting to me in those problems. And so I knew I wanted to be able to think about problems and solving problems. And design is really, you know, solving a visual problem most of the time, but a communications issue. And so is marketing, you know, so it's not like it's a stretch necessarily, but for me, it was like, how can I get to a job where I'm solving problems and I can use all this sort of creative energy that I have to do that, you know? And I think that when I look back over my career, like I once, because I'm in demand gen, I charted out like the creative factor of the work I was doing, like within a role versus the sort of the data side of it. And then just thinking about like being able to use both sides of my brain, right? And still stay connected to creative work. And so for me, it was like integrated campaigns and messaging and thinking about audiences, and that's all very marketing stuff, but you know, coming at it from a place of design first in a lot of ways. And so I just wanted to make sure I kept finding those roles, that type of a job. And luckily, you know, patience, I think more than anything, and then continuing to learn and evolve, right? Because I wasn't a degreed marketer. Like I didn't finish college actually ever. My dad does not like it when I bring that story up, but you know, for me, it was like, I just need to keep learning then, like in order to get to this thing that I feel like I'm better suited for.
That's amazing. Yeah, I definitely had a similar thought process because when I decided to go, and my parents also don't like, well, I think they've accepted by now, but they were not happy when I called them. I said, I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. They were not excited about that. And so something that I did as well was like, okay, understanding like what were the things that I liked about being a lawyer and how can those translate into another career? So when people say, wow, like what you're doing is so different, there's actually a lot of synergy. You know, I had clients as a lawyer, I had to do a lot of public speaking, but it's in front of federal judges, not necessarily on Zoom. Well, now it's on Zoom, but back then, you know, in person, like talking to judges, depositions, you know, like there was so a lot of the skill sets that I learned, you know, in law school and working as an attorney translated beautifully, you know, to a career in digital marketing, being client facing. So yeah, it's kind of cool the way that you can do that. You can almost like dismantle, like, what is the career I've been in for a long time or the career I studied for, and how can I like transfer those skills to something else?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, to me, there are some skills that are, if you can nail those, you got a much better chance, right? Great communication, written, verbal, and otherwise, good presence about that. Like, you know, being able to, I think, try to own a Zoom a little bit if you can, right? And I also think, you know, just really like project management, like, can you get stuff done? Like, and can you get it done when it needs to get done? And sometimes influencing others to do what they need to do, right? Like, even if you're not a manager of people, and, you know, that comes through in like, honestly, waitressing, cooking on the line. Like I did that stuff in college, and I can think through like chaotic dinners when it was really busy, and just the multitasking of it all and being able to try to stay calm in that. That's a great skill to have, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for
absolutely. Sure. No, I definitely agree with that. So we've been talking a little bit about like skills. So how did you go about just identifying your skill gaps, from, designer to marketer,
Yeah.
and just upskilling? Like, what did you do? You said you
Yeah.
learned a lot. What kind of,
Yeah.
how did you learn?
I mean, I actually didn't say, okay, I need to go out and master this particular skill set, or like, if I'm going to be good, it's going to be because I learned that thing. But I have this, I've been doing this for years. Of course, it started out in like grade school, like journaling about people I might be in love with, but then it turned into like reflection journaling, which I do every 2 or 3 months at a time. I go without doing it. And then I'm like, I can feel it in myself. And I'm like, I'm on edge. Like I don't feel centered. And that's just paying attention to like me, stuff. But like when I feel that, I'm like, okay, I need a day. And I take myself into this like Google Doc and I just dump it all. What are my problems? What am I loving? What do I need to do basically from that? So first it's all the problems, and I organize it a little bit because I'm nerdy. And then I think to myself, okay, how can I approach this? Like, what do I need to do to fix these particular problems? Sometimes it's me. Set better boundaries. Okay, I can do that. Sometimes it's like, you don't know how to do this thing and it's stressing you. Cool. Take a course, get a mentor, or beg someone to teach me, whatever it takes. So I think I've just been doing that a lot over the course of my career. And I still do that. I just went through this like probably about 2 months ago. It's like, what's going on?
Well, I mean, again, going back to being very self-aware, but it sounds like you put the time and effort and energy to like maintain that self-awareness. Like, it's not just like, oh, I'm self-aware, but you're actually like sitting down and spending that time to reflect. So that's,
I mean, it definitely has in some cases made me do some really dramatic things to get things into a better place. Right. Like we were living downtown San Francisco up until a month ago.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I think I just need to de-stress a bit. I mean, demand gen's hard work. It's like lots of numbers, big pipeline goals, like, very revenue oriented role and very cross-functional role. And I love it. I can't dream of doing anything else really. It's like great, but it's also a lot. And so I needed to be able to decompress. And I wasn't really finding that in the city. Like we lived right downtown. It was just always intense all the time. And now I'm literally like, I'm looking at ducks right now.
That's amazing.
So it just changed. I was like, I think I need this really big change. And thankfully, we were able to find a place and make that work. But it was like, this is probably the right thing. So I can focus on other stuff, not just trying to not be stressed all the time.
No, I think that's amazing. And I'm glad you like listen to yourself. So that's good.
To a fault, Monica. It's all about my feelings all the time.
Emotion led. So when you think about like the people that are either on your team, or people that you're looking to maybe like add to your team, do you have a process for them to kind of help them identify skill gaps? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, some companies have more prescriptive, process for like reflection, assessments, feedback from others, and that sort of thing. But even without that structure, I think something that I really like to do is I try to just look for themes in people. Like after spending, months with somebody in Zooms these days, at least you get a feel for like where their strengths are naturally, right? And the aptitudes and stuff. And you can see when they get excited, and you can see when they're like, oh, I have to do the thing. And I just try to talk about that stuff. And then maybe that's just my style too, because it's all, like I said, warm feelings, lots of feelings, which is really annoying for some people. But, it's like, hey, I think that like, if you could channel that into something else, or, you're really good at communicating, why don't you take on team comms for a while? And, it's like, you can kind of see when there's like a great alignment, and you just want to try to like blow a little air into that little fire and see what happens. And I think that's really important. We take the time as managers, at least, to do that. But there are some people who are like, oh, I never really thought about that much. And so it's like, well, do you want to talk to other people who do that? And then try to connect them? Because I think I just saw a question, come through around that. It's like, networking is intimidating. We could talk about that too, but I just think about how can I help set people up with those conversations, or an article might spark a conversation sometimes, or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And it sounds like you are being a Linda to those on your team as well.
Right,
So like
She's a
trying
good
to make that
example.
connection.
Yeah. And I think it's also interesting. There are people who are like, it's not about my career right now,
Mhm.
and it's not, I don't have children. So and that is, I realize that changes how I approach my life, my time, right? But for other people, it's not just about like the work life. It's like, I'm a caregiver, or I'm a parent, or I'm going through some stuff. And in that case, it's like, how can I just support that need? And, there are people who are like, I'm not trying to get up. I'm not trying to go be the next, VP of something. It's like, all right, cool. Do you want to be the better version of this or not? It's like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is personal, right?
Yeah, I agree. And that's like what Mickey was talking about too, when it came to
Right.
like work-life balance, even like outweighing the bank balance and like the money. That's so true. Where I feel like a few years ago, that wasn't really, a conversation. It was just, how can I make the most money as I can?
That's very true.
Which is fine. We all need money to buy suits, um, So as we close out International Women's Month, do you have any advice for those who are considering a career pivot?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't be afraid to ask people, to talk about it, right? Like, even if it's not someone that you often interact with or have shared in the past with, like, I kind of call this like, make your sounding board, right? Like, who are the people that you could talk to or ask about questions, or just interest interviews even is a really good way to see, like, am I fitting into this naturally, or do I have some work to do still? And being open to that feedback, like, be gentle with yourself in the process. You're going to mess it up. You're probably not going to get the very first offer. If you do, awesome. That's great and very exciting. Let's see. I actually think, this actually goes back to some of the research too, is really, really think, and again, feelings and thinking here, but, write down the things that you care about the most. If it's money, that's fine. I actually am very motivated by money. So, I know that has to be in my top 3, but, so flexibility matters a lot, right? For me. So thinking about that, think about the life you want to be living to some degree, and then think, will a career in this get me closer to that ideal state? And I think, having just an understanding of, if you take on a certain job, you're working late nights all the time, would that impact something that you value a lot? And is the trade-off worth it? So I just think it's like, spend a little time to noodle that stuff, talk to other people about, what they've done. And I think interest interviews are a great way to go to. I'm thinking about doing what you do. Monica, can I buy you a coffee and talk to you for 15 minutes? I think it goes a long way.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. That was so hard for me to believe when I was coming out of school was, I was so intimidated, especially by people who were so advanced in their careers. Something that my dad told me that stuck with me was that people love helping people. People naturally like talking about themselves, and people like helping other people. Maybe not everyone, but in general, people do like to help others. So, being very vocal and telling everyone, I know I'm answering my own question, but telling everyone, like your friends, friends, hey, I really want a career in tech. And like you said, like setting up those informational interviews. A friend of mine told me about her friend who was graduated from law school. So I told my dad, like, hey, my friend's friend, whom I've never met, just graduated, took the bar, and is just looking for informational interviews. So my dad was like, oh, I work with lawyers all the time. He's in procurement. So he sent out an email. She had like 4 informational interviews, and then she like got an actual job offer out of it.
Wow.
And that's just by her telling her friend and her friend telling me. So the power of a network, sometimes it's like the fancy, cocktail hours, but sometimes it's just telling your friend like, hey, I'm trying to get into this, this field or this industry. Do you know anyone?
Yeah. And sometimes, honestly, it's like your neighbor. It's not even like a work contact. Networking events are, sorry if you guys invite me to anything later, they're the worst, I do have like actually like a pretty strong introvert side of me too. So it's like, they drain me. I love people, but then it's like, it's a lot to figure out how to do well.
It's true. So thinking about like kind of like the stage that we're in right now with this like major like shift to hybrid work, thinking about like technology, honestly thinking about like Udemy and the fact that you can learn literally anything through courses. Do you see like, when you think back to like your, transition that you made previously and like the access to all these courses, like, do you feel like maybe your transition would have been shorter or like different?
With access to more learning opportunities,
access to more like learning on demand.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I definitely think that no matter what the modality is, whether it's a course taught at the local community college or an online course that you can watch parts of just to get exactly what you need in the moment, I think that there's a lot of access to information out there today. And I think that's amazing, right? Like I think about my nephew who's so early on in his like life, and he's got some YouTube videos he watches about carpentry, and he's, but I think you just sort of surround yourself with information. And it's really just like picking and choosing and then, digging in where you find an interest sometimes. But yeah, I definitely feel like that's a way to get more confidence around things. Like sometimes I talk to people who are thinking about going back to grad school and they're like, Steph, you didn't finish college. Should I do this? Because they want my opinion. I'm like, do you need to? I don't know. I didn't need it, but that doesn't mean you don't. And one gal said, it's because she feels like it will give her a different level of confidence in herself, knowing she's gone through that, achieved that, learned that, a certain way. And I thought, then if that's what you feel like you need, do it by all means. I think just know what you need for yourself too. Yeah.
I definitely agree. And I love that. It's like, what do you need? It's not a universal path,
Yeah, totally.
I love that. So how do you keep your passion, through career ups and downs? Moving to wine country, I'm sure it's absolutely helping.
It's a distraction. I don't know. Yeah. How do I keep my passion? I also think it ebbs and flows. So at the end of the day, like work isn't going to be 99% fun, but I try to work at places where I appreciate the people next to me or in the Zoom with me. I definitely think working for a company that believes in learning, in this case, that's a great personal alignment. But I also just try to remind myself, like, my work is not everything. Like I don't typically work past 6 p.m. I pay for it sometimes because I feel like I'm a little behind. I'm just like, nope, big breath, gonna be okay. And instead I'm gonna try to go like watch the ducks or paint. I paint on the weekends, I do watercolor, so I just try to fill myself with things that are gonna get me through it. And actually that break in my mindset and that change, when I can get it, makes a difference. And I think, passion's an interesting one. There was many years where I was just like punching a clock and just doing the work and I used to blog a ton. I used to do a lot more of this. And I just went through a phase where I was like, I'm just working right now. And it kind of comes and goes. But I think as I've spent more time trying to figure out what happiness means to me, it's just like, it's a little easier to tap into that when I need it to.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I love that. I love that you paint on the weekends. That's awesome. I know we had a question in the chat just about like networking, and just, so whether it's thinking about like networking or just honestly thinking about like the role of mentorship and sponsorship, like as women in tech, like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there was a really specifically this question around like, how should women or how can women think about networking in general? It's like, there's two approaches I've used to some relatively successful degree. One is to go to that event with someone in sales, because they actually naturally tend to be a bit more willing to take a risk at the front of a conversation. And I respect the heck out of that, because I will just retreat. And then I'm just standing in the corner with my, drink, like, I'm doing it again. So I try to pair myself with someone who maybe can get us into conversations. And I try to also go with someone who maybe I know, but I'm not like good friends with, because if nothing else, I'm spending time with that person, developing that relationship. So it's not a win-win-win, but like, at least you're getting a little bit out there. And I also think just picking the right events. Like
Mhm.
some of them, when they're so big, it's really hard to like make a connection. But small panels with a little like networking hour or something actually helps sometimes break the ice a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. And I also like how your idea of bringing someone who maybe is like not like a super close friend, but someone you
Mhm.
want to get to know better. And you have that opportunity kind of in between the lulls of conversation to really get to know that person. So it can still feel like a success.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we used to joke when I was younger, and in the city, there's a lot more opportunity to go to events and stuff.
Mhm.
It'd just be like, which one tonight, everybody? And then we would joke about how many cards we could get, and it was like a thing. And now I'm like, I just want one good conversation
Mhm.
with Gail or something. It's just like that's enough for me,
Yeah. Yeah.
But it just depends on what you're trying to get out of it, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think having a goal and not just like doing it because you think you're supposed to do it, but like having like an objective tied to it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's good to just like be consistent. If nothing else, you are eventually going to build connections, even if they're not deep,
Mhm.
that you can try to tap into later if you need them. But
Yeah, no, I agree. It looks like Melody just dropped a great question in the chat.
yeah.
In terms of
Mm.
career pivots to new industries, do you have recommendations for not having to start at the bottom again for people more advanced in their career?
This is a really good question. I don't have a personal experience thinking about seniority, right? I'm thinking, okay, I'm a senior director. If I go shift totally,
Mhm.
how would I work up? But I actually was the director of marketing in a smaller startup and then took a job at Facebook. And one of my dear friends, one of my sounding board members, said, you're probably going to have to just start out as an individual contributor because it's a big company and it's leveling and there's a whole lot to unpack in that. And I was like, oh, I mean, I live to manage and teach people, so it's like, I was like, okay, can I handle that? Can I just go and influence and learn and then see? And I did it. And it was actually really good for me because it was a step back to take in some time to just like settle myself, orient myself a bit. But with it, I think it was about 6 months, I was a team lead, so the opportunity happened. And I think they knew that when they were bringing me in too. She's got this experience, but we have this immediate need. It's not ideal, but maybe paying attention to where the company growth is at and the maturity of that company. So maybe you're thinking, okay, what's going to be next? I know that can be a double-edged sword because sometimes, a hiring manager might say, well, they're just going to want the next promotion. They're not coming in to do the work we need today. And so it's, think about how you ask that question of like, I have a passion for this. This work sounds really interesting to me. Is there room to also lead a specific initiative or project and kind of teeing it up a bit without saying, yeah, but I really want to be a manager of people tomorrow, so I do think there's a bit of give and take in those conversations, but that's just my perspective on it. Yeah,
That's great. Another great question from Naomi. What advice do you have for people who tend to be more introverted with regards to how they show up to others within a company?
I think be strategic. It's understandable. Not everyone is going to want to be off mute, owning the Zoom. I think it's about how you're feeding from that too. It can be really exhausting. So pick and choose your battles. Like I think it's important to advocate for your ideas and yourself where you can. And also like think about the one-on-one relationships that you can build so that they're also advocating for you when the time comes. So it's just about thinking through sort of like, okay, this particular group of people, I really need to show up as like the person with the thing that we need, this idea or this topic or whatever. But you don't have to do that across the board all the time. It's exhausting, so you just pick and choose, be strategic, try to find a couple people that you can also get sort of like the partnership in. Nothing better than someone saying, oh, and remember, when Monica said this the other day, and then your ideas carried through and you don't have to necessarily do it, but
Yes.
that's one thought I have.
Yeah, I love that. Like that, the whole idea of like mentorship, but then also like sponsorship, like who is like kind of going to bat for you when you're not in the room, or even if you are in the room, but you're just like not speaking up for yourself.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. I have, just thinking about sponsorship and mentorship, it's like, I think it's important that we also identify that there are going to be people at the company who have more perceived power, and asking them to say, hey, next time we're in that meeting, would you mind speaking up on this for me? Like I've had those conversations in the past, and actually most of the time people are like, oh man, that's a good call. Yeah, I'll do better. So I think sometimes it's trying to find those folks and just singling them out a little bit.
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to sit in on one of your meetings. Like I can learn so much.
Come on over.
Can you tell us about a time where you took like a risk when it came to your career that really paid off, and like what you learned from that experience?
Ooh, a risk. Yeah. I was actually working it was at the time lynda.com. So it was a long time ago. And we were launching I think it was our mobile app, like first mobile app to learn, on your device. And we didn't really have product marketing. And we didn't really have like a plan to launch that thing. And I said, I think I can handle this. I think I could do it. And man, I bit off a lot with that because it was, it's a tricky release. There's a lot that goes into it. It was the first time. So there's a lot of extra scrutiny. It was the first time we decided to like send emails, update the website, do all the things at once, like integrated, launch like that at that scale. And I just had been at the company for only about 3 months or so. And so I didn't really have any sort of internal rapport with people yet. It's a lot of influencing others to get that to be the thing they care about. Definitely felt risky because I was like, I feel like if I fail, that's it. That's my brand here, but luckily it did turn out really well. And I think, it was a lot more around like leveraging some of those communication skills and like, putting in the time to paint a visual picture for people. So design, I was like, here's what this is going to look like in the timeline. And I made it like pretty looking, and I would show that, and people were like, oh, she knows what she's doing. I was like, I just know some basic design skills, but it's helping right now. You know what I mean? So I think it was like tapping some like, deep fear place, and then saying like, okay, what do I have to try to make it seem like I know what I'm doing? It was like the biggest one. But I think, definitely felt risky at the time because I was like, now I feel like this is what I'm going to be known for,
That's awesome. Well, it definitely sounds like it paid off for sure.
Yeah, they still have an app, and they got bought by a big company, so it worked out.
Lynda.
Yeah.
So just thinking, kind of going back to this idea of like women in tech, are there any changes that you would like to see just for women in this tech industry, just moving forward? I know it's kind of a big question.
That's a great question. I mean, yes is the short answer, but I think what I want to see, and I still do this every time I look at a conference lineup and I count the number of men and number of women who are going to be speaking. And I would like for that to be more women than men more often, because I think that there's just so much that, we tend to go, let's talk about soft skills and how you balance your life. And we're kind of doing that right now, which is amazing. But, there's also this really technical skill set, right? That we're often we gloss over that part to talk about like how you're the sort of mom in the office, or, and we miss out on all this great knowledge. And so I think what a really important thing to continue to just push for, and watch more women bringing others to the forefront of that. I think in my experience, not always, but sometimes it can get kind of competitive. And I think what we really want to see is other people bringing others along on that journey. And so, I just don't want us to forget that. It still matters, still super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Steph, thank you so much for coming and like dropping so many gems today.
Sorry.
I feel really inspired by, I already know you, but I feel even more inspired by you, just in your journey. I think especially the fact that you not only want to like have the best career for yourself, but you're also looking to those who are around you and try to help them also have like the best careers that they can have based on what's important to them and based off of their values.
Yeah. Well, I hope if we can enjoy work, then we can enjoy life a little bit easier too. So
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've had a few questions in the chat, but I'm going to just invite Mickey and Maddie back on the virtual stage, just in case there are any more questions in the chat that we did not get to.
Thanks, Monica. And thank you, Steph, so much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Very enlightening. And I love getting to learn more about you. Not sure that I mentioned it on the call, but Steph is actually my client. And I just love getting to know our clients on a deeper level even. And just before we get to Q&A, just a quick shout out that my colleague Gail is going to be putting just a quick poll. It should be a pop-up if you guys can just answer that. There it is. If you can just answer that, that would be great. We really appreciate your feedback. But one question we have is, what is something you know that you wish you realized earlier in your career? And I think that could be for both of you.
Good, Monica, you go first.
Can you repeat it?
Yes. What is something that you know now that you wish you realized earlier in your career?
I think I have mine.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm still
All
thinking of mine.
I don't think I understood the importance of setting boundaries when I was younger. I don't like to think of myself as a doormat, but I can think of many times when I took on way too much, or was willing to work a weekend too often, or kept notifications on my phone. All of those are like big fat no's for me now. Like I'm really protective now, and boundary setting is super hard. I mean, if I could apply that to my personal life, I'd probably be in good shape. But like, yeah, I definitely wish I figured that out and then realized how much of an impact that could have on me.
That's definitely a good one. Actually, as you were talking, I thought of mine. This is something, unfortunately, I only figured out just like a few years ago, but that my career and my identity are not the same thing. I think it's important to enjoy what you do, to, take pride in your work. But like, I am not like, if I have a job that's like draining me, where I'm like working way too many hours, but it's like a cool sounding job, or I get like cool free stuff, like that's not enough. But who I am as a person is like not my job. So even when I meet people, I try really hard to not just be like, hi, nice to meet you. What do you do? I really try to like get to know them as an individual. Because I have incredible friends who are like leveling up the game, and I have incredible friends who are like stay-at-home moms, like beautiful and wonderful children. Like who you are is not what you do. So that's something I just recently learned.
I'm going to try and own up to that now too.
Yeah, I love that.
Maddie, is it okay if I add in one more thing to that? So one thing that I would share is that always apply to jobs that you don't think you're 100% qualified for. That's something that I'm still trying to own up to. Even for the role that I have today, I was interviewing, I was like, maybe I'm not qualified, maybe I can't do it. And like that, the imposter syndrome is something that I always have to really dig deep and say, like, even during performance reviews, like my manager's like, you're doing fantastic. I'm like, are you sure? So I like really like make sure, like one thing I could go back in time is just like really dig deep and say like, I am doing a good job, like, toot my own horn. So that's one thing I would add.
Yeah.
Great.
That's great.
We have a question from Leah. At what point did you start building confidence and standing up more for yourself in your career? And do you have any tips on how to work on that? And let me know if you need me to repeat it again.
Wow, that's a good one too. You want to say mortar maybe, or?
Yeah.
Yep. I think yesterday, maybe. No, I'm just kidding. Probably, honestly, not until I felt like I was like what I would call myself doing a really good job, which is unfortunate. But I was like, I'm really critical, tough on myself, and I don't think that I would have put myself out there to try to prove to anybody else that I was really good until I felt it inside. And so I can remember it's probably about, I don't know, 9 years ago now. And I was like, I'm taking interview. I was kind of ready for some change, and I started trying to get some interviews, not taking them, like people are knocking on my door, but I started doing interviews, and I was like, oh man, I just felt like I know my shit. Excuse my language, but like I was like, okay, and that was like the first time where I was like, yeah, and then it slowly built from there, But I definitely think that I like, if you just grade yourself somehow and then say, I'm really good at this and I own that, and you just be okay with that part, like that's something deep inside you, and then you can use that to sort of like build around and build confidence around it. That's my tip. I'm working on it, I guess.
I love that. I would say for me, I can't pinpoint the exact moment. I just know a general era of time. But it was when I started like listening to positive feedback. I think I can be very dismissive, like, oh, great job. I'm like, yeah, I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing my job. But when I kind of took a moment to reflect and feel proud of, the good job that I was doing, like that was an important point. And, when people would tell me like, oh, yeah, this is great. Or if I was able to start even helping people, like whether it was a new person joining the team, kind of showing them the ropes, or like I mentor a lot of people. So like when I was able to like, oh, wait, like I'm mentoring people kind of using my own experiences or things that have helped me, and it's having a positive impact on someone else. To me, it was like, oh, okay, then I guess I am kind of at a place where I should feel, confident, et cetera. But even like, because I've pretty much only worked in like a client/customer kind of relationship field. And so when clients or customers would send me an email or would say, oh, this was amazing, I have a folder, an attaboy folder, like an old like law client told me about attaboy folders, but I would put it in that folder. Not that I would go back and read them every Friday, but just to kind of collect and know that, oh, I am doing a good job. This is literally like evidence or proof for it. And then I would, if I needed to I felt the need to advocate for myself come review time, I would like, I have like all these emails from clients and these are the things they're saying and how I've helped and changed and impacted their business. So that was big for me.
I remember you telling me about that folder. I still haven't created mine because I'm very much still in that space of I did a good job. Fine. It's my job. So I'm trying to work on that. Nikki, what about you?
Yeah, I would just like plus one to what Monica just said. Like for me, mentoring and sponsoring other folks like within my team or outside of my team brings me so much joy, because I'm a big believer of like always sending the elevator back down. I remember when I was an IC and I was just starting off like out of college, and I wanted to see either like women leading or women of color or just someone else that looked like me or spoke like me. And it was very difficult not seeing someone like that. And so now that I'm in a leadership role, I'm like, how can I help someone else? So being able to do that really inspires me, and it helps me build confidence as I move forward in my career.
Yeah. I think we have time for like one more question. This is more directed for Steph working at Udemy. Are there certain industries that you see people taking advantage of short form virtual learning? With the most of them don't have like financial means for like traditional cost. Are there certain industries that people seem to be taking advantage of that more?
I don't know about it from the industry lens, but I do know that a lot of, I mean, just in general, if you think about it, a lot of learning is like very much in the moment. Like, oh, I need to figure out this particular problem or this particular thing. And so I think that's where short form really shines, right? But if you want to become an expert in something, you want to go deep, you're probably going to have a little bit of a different approach to like what you're absorbing, what you're learning. Maybe short form plays a part in that. But I don't have anything specifically around industry.
Got it. And we have one last question. I'm sorry. What do you think like the biggest challenge is that you face with ever evolving tech jobs, and how do you try to prepare for it?
Biggest challenge. It's constant change, right? Like just managing that change, absorbing it, figuring out what you do or don't know about it, and then doing it all over again. It just doesn't stop. I think there's always a lot to learn. So I think it's just becoming really comfortable with that.
Well, great. Monica, do you have an answer to that? Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think that was the perfect response, being comfortable with change. And if you're not comfortable with change, learning how to become comfortable with change.
I agree. Well, awesome. That's pretty much all of the questions. We answered a few before you guys brought Mickey and I back. So just thank you guys so much for all of this. Really appreciate you taking the time to give us your story and your perspective.
Great. Thank you. Good to see you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.